Story 1, The Silent Entry. You know that feeling where you wake up suddenly in the middle of the night, totally paralyzed, convinced someone is in the room with you. That primitive, gut-level terror that screams at you not to move. I used to think that was just a nightmare, a trick of the brain. I don't think that anymore. Not after what I found in my apartment. My name is Tyler. I'm 23, and up until a few months ago, I was living in a cheap, run-down apartment complex on the edge of town while finishing my degree. It wasn't nice. The carpet smelled like old cigarettes and the walls were paper thin, but it was mine, and it was the first time I'd ever lived completely alone. For the first couple of months, everything was normal. Boring, actually. I went to classes, worked evenings at a pizza place, and played video games until late. But then, things started feeling off. It's hard to explain, but the vibe in the apartment shifted. It felt heavier. It started with stupid little things I tried to ignore. I'm a creature of habit. I always hang my keys on the hook by the door. One Tuesday morning, I found them sitting on the kitchen counter. I remembered hanging them up the night before, but I just chalked it up to being tired. A few days later, I came home from work and the bathroom door was locked from the inside. I lived alone. I had to use a screwdriver to pop the lock. I told myself the old latch must have just slipped. You do that, you know. You rationalize the creepy stuff because the alternative is too terrifying to consider. The anxiety really kicked in about 2 weeks later. I woke up around 3:00 a.m. freezing. The window in the living room was wide open, the curtains blowing in the cold night wind. I live on the second floor. There's no fire escape. I knew for a fact I had locked that window. I bought extra locks the next day, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The apartment felt violated. I stopped sleeping well. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps. I started leaving lights on. I asked my landlord if maintenance had been in my unit without telling me. He gave me a weird look and said nobody had a key except me and him, and he hadn't been there in months. That made it worse. The breaking point happened last Friday. I got home late from a closing shift. I walked into the kitchen and froze. On my small dining table, there was a single glass of water half full. I hadn't put it there. And right next to it was a crumpled wrapper from a protein bar, a brand I don't eat. My heart felt like it was hammering against my ribs. Someone wasn't just breaking in, they were hanging out. They were comfortable. I didn't sleep there that night. I stayed at a buddy's house and ordered a motion-activated security camera online. I went back the next afternoon while it was bright out, set up the camera hidden on a bookshelf facing the living area and the hallway, and then left again. I spent the weekend staring at my phone, waiting for a notification. It finally came at 2:17 a.m. on Sunday morning. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I opened the app to watch the live feed. The living room was dark, lit only by the dim streetlights outside. Nothing was moving. I watched for 5 minutes, heart pounding, thinking maybe it was a glitch. Then I saw it. The front door didn't open. The window didn't budge. Instead, the narrow door to the utility closet, the tiny space that just held the furnace and water heater, slowly eased open. A shape crawled out. It was a man. He was impossibly thin, dressed in filthy dark clothes. He didn't look around nervously like a burglar would. He moved with horrifying confidence. He stood up and walked silently into the kitchen. I watched on the small screen, sick to my stomach, as this stranger opened my fridge. He stood there in the cold light for a moment, then took out the leftovers I'd saved from the pizza place. He ate them standing in the middle of my kitchen, casually, like he paid rent. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what he did after he finished eating. He didn't steal my TV. He didn't look for cash. He walked into my bedroom. The camera angle only caught the doorway, so I couldn't see him inside. He was in there for 20 minutes. I was watching this live, miles away, paralyzed with fear, knowing this thing was in the room where I should have been sleeping. When he came back out, he walked to the center of the living room and just stopped. He turned slowly and stared directly at the bookshelf where the camera was hidden. He didn't smile or look angry. His face was just blank, dead. He stood there unmoving, staring right into the lens for a full hour. Then, just as silently as he appeared, he crawled back into the utility closet and closed the door. I called the cops immediately. They met me at the apartment. They found a false panel in the back of the utility closet. It led into a narrow crawl space that ran between the walls of the complex, connecting several units. They found a sleeping bag, food wrappers, and dozens of pictures tacked to the studs in the wall. Pictures of me sleeping. They never caught him. He was gone by the time they got into the walls. I moved out that same day, left most of my stuff behind. I live in a secure building now on the top floor, but I still don't sleep through the night. Every time I hear a noise, I have to check the closets, because the scariest part wasn't that he got in. It was knowing that the whole time I was terrified of someone breaking in from the outside. He was already inside, waiting for me to close my eyes. Story 2, the kitchen knife. You ever grab a kitchen knife to cut up an apple or something, and for just a split second, your brain throws out a terrifying, intrusive thought? Like, hey, what if I just jam this right into my hand? You shake it off, tell yourself you're tired, and move on. I used to do that too. I don't anymore. Because now I know that sometimes it's not your brain having those thoughts, it's the knife. My name is David. About 6 months ago, I moved into a small, drab duplex on the west side of Phoenix. It was cheap, quiet, and exactly what I needed after a bad breakup. I didn't have much furniture and even less kitchenware. I found it at a garage sale down the street on my first Saturday there. It was lying on a table next to some rusty pliers. It was an 8-inch chef's knife. It wasn't fancy stainless steel. This thing was old, heavy carbon steel with a dark walnut handle that felt perfectly molded to my grip. The blade had a gray patina from years of use, but the edge was razor sharp. The old guy running the sale sold it to me for $3. I thought it was a steal. Things started getting weird almost immediately, but like an idiot, I ignored it. I'm obsessive about cleaning. I never leave dirty dishes in the sink. But 3 days in, I woke up, walked into the kitchen for coffee, and found the knife sitting in the bottom of the stainless steel sink, covered in water spots. I knew I had washed it, dried it, and put it in the drawer the night before. I just assumed I was more exhausted from the move than I thought. 2 days later, I came home from my shift at the lumber yard. The house was dead silent. I walked into the kitchen and froze. The knife drawer was open about 2 inches. I pulled it open all the way. The knife was gone. A cold spike of adrenaline hit my stomach. I checked the back door. Locked. Windows closed. I started searching the house, my heart hammering against my ribs. I found it in the living room. It was jammed point first into the cushion of my couch, deep, right where I usually sit to watch TV. It wasn't just resting there. Someone had driven it in with force. I pulled it out, my hands shaking so bad I almost cut myself. It felt cold, colder than the room. I should have called the cops right then. But what would I say? Officer, my knife is stalking me. I convinced myself someone had broken in, maybe a previous tenant with a key, just trying to mess with me. I paid a locksmith that night to change the deadbolts. I didn't sleep at all. I sat up in bed, listening to the house settle. Every pop of the drywall sounded like a footstep. The next morning, I couldn't look at the thing. I took the knife, wrapped it in 3 layers of duct tape, and shoved it to the very back of the cabinet under the bathroom sink, behind the cleaning supplies. That night around 3:00 a.m., a noise woke me up. Scrape. It was faint, but in the dead silence of the duplex, it sounded like a scream. Metal on tile. Scrape, tap, scrape. It was coming from the bathroom. I lay there, paralyzed, sweat pooling at the base of my neck. My bedroom door was open a crack. I watched that sliver of darkness, praying it would move. The scraping stopped. Then slowly, my bedroom door creaked open wider. Nobody was there. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the bed and crept into cabinet under the sink was agape. The roll of duct tape was on the floor, unspooled and empty. I turned toward the kitchen. The light from the street lamp outside cast long, weird shadows across the linoleum floor. The knife was sitting in the middle of the kitchen table. The blade was gleaming in the pale light. It looked expectant. That was it, I snapped. I wasn't scared anymore. I was furious. I stormed into the kitchen to grab the knife, planning to take it outside and bury it in the desert. I reached for the handle on the table, and then the world tilted. A massive wave of vertigo hit me. My vision blurred, and a sickening sense of deja vu washed over me. It wasn't a memory of seeing something happen. It was a memory of doing it. I remembered the resistance of the couch cushion as I drove the blade in. I remembered the tacky sound of the duct tape as I unwrapped it in the dark bathroom a few minutes ago. I remembered the cold tile on my bare feet as I walked to the kitchen to place it on the table, waiting for myself to wake up. I looked down at my hand, hovering over the table. It wasn't reaching to pick up the knife. It was already holding it. My knuckles were white, gripped tight around that dark walnut handle. I wasn't fighting an intruder. I was fighting my own hand. The urge to lift the blade to bring it toward my own throat was overwhelming. It felt alien, like a magnet pulling my arm against my will. I screamed and used my left hand to pry my right fingers off the handle one by one. I threw the knife across the room. It clattered against the stove and spun on the floor. I ran out of the house in my boxers. I drove to a 24-hour diner and sat in a booth, shaking, drinking black coffee until the sun came up. I moved out the next day. I left almost everything behind. I just took my clothes and got the hell out of there. I live with my brother now. I don't own any knives. I buy pre-cut vegetables. But sometimes when I'm walking through a store and past the kitchen aisle, my right hand starts to ache. It throbs right in the palm like it's missing something heavy and cold that it used to hold on to tight. Story 3, under the bed. You know that thing you did as a kid, where you take a running leap into your bed so your feet wouldn't touch the floor near the edge, because you just knew something was waiting underneath to grab your ankle. We grow out of that. We tell ourselves it's stupid, but I'm telling you right now, start doing it again. Because the one time you think you're too old for that nonsense is the exact moment you realize you were right to be afraid. My name is Mark. A few months ago, I moved into a garden-level apartment just outside of Denver. It was one of those rushed decisions after a bad breakup. I needed a place fast and cheap. The complex was unremarkable, mostly full of shift workers and college kids keeping to themselves. The unit itself was okay. It smelled faintly of mildew and old carpet cleaner, but it was mine. For the first 2 weeks, I loved the silence. It was a relief, but then the silence started to feel heavy. It started with stupid little things. I'm a creature of habit. I put my keys in the same bowl by the door every single day. One Tuesday, I was running late for work and the bowl was empty. I tore the apartment apart in a panic. I finally found them sitting on the nightstand next to my bed. I never put them there. I chalked it up to stress and lack of sleep. A few days later, I woke up feeling freezing cold. The window next to my bed was cracked open about 3 inches. I knew for a fact I had locked it before turning in. I lived on the ground floor. I wasn't taking chances like that. I convinced myself the old latch must have just slipped. You do that, you know. Your brain tries to protect you from the terrifying reality by making up boring excuses. The real fear set in on a Thursday night. I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone in the dark. My bed was this cheap IKEA frame that sat pretty high off the floor, leaving a large, shadowed cavern underneath. Around 2:00 a.m., I dropped my phone. It bounced off the mattress and slid right under the bed, landing near the wall. I sighed, annoyed, and leaned over the edge, hanging upside down to fish for it. I swept my hand blindly across the carpet in the dark space. My fingertips brushed against something. It wasn't my phone, it felt like denim, rough, cold denim. I recoiled so fast I nearly fell off the bed. My heart was slamming against my ribs. I sat there in the pitch black, barely breathing, listening. Nothing, just the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Get a grip, Mark, I thought. It was probably an old sweatshirt you kicked under there. I turned on my phone's flashlight and leaned over the edge again. I shone the beam into the dusty gap. At first, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing. It looked like a pile of dirty laundry shoved against the far wall. Then, the pile shifted. A pair of eyes reflected the lead light. There was a man curled up in the fetal position directly underneath me. He was impossibly thin, dressed in filthy jeans and a dark hoodie. He wasn't looking at me, though. He was facing the wall, rigid, his hands clamped over his ears. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My throat just locked up. I scrambled backward off the bed, tripping over my own feet and backed all the way to the apartment door. I fumbled with the lock, my hands shaking violently, and ran out into the cool night air in just my boxers. I called 911 from the parking lot, shivering uncontrollably. When the cops arrived, they went in guns drawn. They dragged him out. He didn't fight, he barely even moved. Here's the twist that really messed me up. They found a little sleeping nest back there. Food wrappers, an empty water bottle, and my spare set of keys. He'd been there for at least a week. Every night I slept, he was 6 inches beneath me. But that wasn't the worst part. When they questioned him, he wouldn't speak. He just kept muttering one thing over and over. It wasn't safe out there. He almost saw me. The police checked the exterior of my apartment. They found fresh pry marks on my back window, the one I thought had just slipped open. And in the soft dirt outside, there were heavy boot prints that didn't belong to me or the squatter under my bed. The guy wasn't hiding to hurt me. He had broken in because he was terrifyingly desperate to hide from someone else. Someone who was actively trying to get into my apartment while I was sleeping. I moved out the next day. I left my bed frame behind. I sleep on a mattress right on the floor now. No gaps, but sometimes late at night I lie there awake, wondering if the person who was hunting him ever realized their prey was gone, or if they're still watching my old windows, waiting for a chance to get inside.